Hi, I'm Jen Schulter, candidate for Palm Beach County School Board District 6. Thank you for joining me to the conclusion of the war on our nation, how Marxism has invaded America through our school system. And if you haven't tuned in before, just a quick note about me. I'm not just a candidate, I am a mom of three, two with special needs. And I've also been an education and special needs advocate for the past 16 years. So this whole series dives into the big question, what exactly is wrong with our schools? And if you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, I suggest you pause and go back and review those and then join us. Part 1 is on CRT and anti-American indoctrinations. Part 2 is sexually explicit materials and assaults. Part 3 is the de-education of America, the dumbing down of our students. And then this is part 4, the finale, the bigger picture. I'm going to recap parts 1 through 3, but expand on the impacts that the indoctrinations, the school board actions, and the sexualized materials have had not only on our students, but on our nation as well, and what we can do to fix it. So a brief recap. Critical race theory is also known as CRT. It's really Marxism. It inverts nice sounding words like equity, inclusion, and diversity, and it also includes social emotional learning, or SEL for short. SEL and these terms sound fantastic and something that we'd want. Unfortunately, these are being used in the inversion of the original intent. And again, equity is not equality. Equity is the forced equal outcomes, regardless of merit or effort, where equality is what we all want. Equality is where everyone is given the same starting block, the same teachers, the same caliber of education, the same materials, but it's up to the individual to make the most of it. A lot of talk has been happening recently about Florida's rejection of majority of math books. I went into the Florida Department of Education's website. Here are some of the examples of material rejection. If you'd like to know more about this, you can go to www.fldoe.org. And again, many teachers, not all, but many teachers are pushing critical race theory. It's what they've been taught in college, and the school boards are pushing the training to just reinforce this. So the Zen Education Project is a pledge that over 5,000 teachers nationwide, including many in Florida, have signed, and they pledge to teach what they consider the truth, regardless of the laws. And that includes the fact that they believe the United States is systemically racist, and they must acknowledge this and help students understand this. There is a connection between CRT and the sexually explicit materials. They're all used for the same wider agenda. This hypersexualizing of our children means that tolerance and diversity now must include porn and pedophilia. All of this is coined in a phrase called sexual chaos, and it's now the main vehicle to push moral relativism and, frankly, the destruction of our nation. That's what Marxism is all about. So sexually explicit materials, or SEM for short, are throughout almost all schools of Florida. The Pacific Justice Institute, along with the Florida Citizens Alliance, did a massive in-depth report, and they found materials throughout 99% of the counties in Florida. And I went into that in part 2. And just a reminder, this is a 3rd-degree felony we're talking here. So SEM is used in schools, not just in the curriculum, not just in the sexual education classes, but they also use websites like the example shown on the screen. They use handouts like the gingerbread man given to kindergartners, and they're forcing teachers to take training that they are uncomfortable with, they don't agree with. And frankly, these teachers want to get back to what their job is supposed to be about, teaching academics. The official American School Counselor Association has published a guide directing counselors to hide information from parents. This is all part of that term grooming that you've been hearing a lot about. I went and took a look at this report this guide, and it states that the approach should include the parents and guardian engagement as appropriate. It went on further to say that the student has a right to decide when and with whom and to what extent to share private information, and that includes with their parents. In 2014, the Nonpartisan Government Accountability Office published a lengthy report warning that public school employees were, quote, grooming students with the intent to perpetuate future abuse. And according to this report, it states only 15 states have adopted policies to regulate grooming behaviors, and only 18 require awareness and prevention training. Now, for those of you who don't know specifically about grooming, grooming is working a minor up to actual sexual abuse. So it starts with giving them extra attention and gifts. That moves to using sexual language and gestures, written and verbal advances, sharing photos and videos, and then to the final stage, which is sexual abuse. One other thing to note in this report, they state very emphatically, background checks do not pick up on what is not reported. And that's a big problem because, as I went into in a previous series, previous part of the series, Florida has major red flags because they are not reporting abuse. There is some that is getting reported, and you can find those in headlines all throughout the web. I have some of those up here for you to look at, and I talked about those previously. But whether it's through social media apps, through sending nude photos to actually impregnating students, it's happening. And we also have to deal with our current presidential administration, who is assaulting parents' rights and religious rights, insisting that parents accept transgenderism, and not only that, pushing for permanent disfigurement surgeries and pushing very, very dangerous drugs on children. Now, remember, you have to be 21 to drink alcohol, 18 to vote, and 16 to drive a motor vehicle. And a little bit more about sexual assaults. The Department of Education published a report in 2004, and it stated that nearly 10% of K through 12 students nationwide have been victims of sexual misconduct by public school employees. That equals to about 4.5 million children. Carol Lieberman, a board-certified psychiatrist, stated on record that this focus on sexuality is stimulating kids and has resulted in a sharp increase in the amount of sexual assaults at school. Now, bear in mind, when she's talking sexual assaults, this is children on children, and this is happening even in kindergarten and in elementary school. Now, our schools are using organizations as part of their sexual education curriculum. Palm Beach County, for instance, uses One Love. And as you can clearly see from the images on their non-password protected section of their website, it's including things like 9 ways to support your transitioning partner. And it's not just through the sex ed classes, it's not just through the curriculum and the supplemental materials, it's through books. And these are materials that parents may not be able to see because classrooms have libraries, and those books in those particular libraries are not allowed to go home. The school boards are ignoring the law. I went into this previously. One thing I just want to remind you of is Florida Statute 1003.46. It goes into explicit detail as to what is and isn't allowed in sexual education instruction, and they're violating that every day. And as bad as all of that is, it's actually a diversion away from the horrible proficiency levels. And that includes methods like Learn to Test, Common Core, which is still around, lottery versus merit system, and how higher level math and math in general is considered racist. And Lynn Finn is a former adjunct scholar. She's director of the Center for Education at Washington Policy Center and has been an education policy analyst for the past 13 years. And her research suggests the unmistakable decline in the literacy of America's students from 4th to 12th grade is a direct result of the shift from academic excellence towards social constructs like CRT. Her research shows she went into public records and did a deep dive in all of the data. She said that the state level and most of the local education officials are no longer focusing on maintaining high academic standards and providing the best education, but they're replacing that concern for learning with designed political agendas to instill doubt, mental pain, and low expectations in students. And I went into this in greater detail in part 1. This race-centered agenda wants to divide kids from each other, their communities, and their teachers. And we're seeing this every day, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So the lower expectations plus the focus shift away from academic excellence towards social constructs like CRT means fewer literate graduates. And I did a deep dive on the academics, which is in part 3. I took a look at Miami-Dade County specifically because they have 12 of the top 20 high schools in the state of Florida. I thought that was interesting and wanted to know why. One thing to note about Miami-Dade, the top 10 high schools have an average population rate of 338.8 students per school. So I took a look. They have a plethora of schools, not only because they have close to 400,000 students, but because they use very, very small schools. So their top schools, they had an A rating for graduation and an F for reading, math, and college ready. And for those who don't know what the College Ready Index is, that's from US News and World Report. And what they do, and they did this throughout America, they took a look at each high school. They looked at the 12th graders. Part of the score is how many 12th graders attempted to take at least one AP or IB test, and how many attempted to just take a class, AP or IB class. And I also took a look, of course, at Palm Beach County. I went into this again in greater detail in part 3. These are the standard schools along with Dreyfus and Suncoast. 20 received an A for graduation, 20 received an F for college ready. Then for reading proficiency, 13 got an F, and math, 14 of them got an F. And this data is from the US News and World Report along with the Florida DOE. And speaking of the Florida DOE, I took a look at individual FSA scores. And this is county by county. Bottom line, if you see red, that county, their scores are declining. So bottom line to this whole academic damage, the disparity between the graduation rates versus the math and reading proficiency rates means the students are pushed through and are not prepared. By focusing on emotions and not facts, they are not preparing students to face worldwide competition or just function. Speaking of functioning, this is all having an effect on their mental and physical health as well. Hundreds of local parents, therapists, and medical professionals brought documented evidence of the personal effects that the mandates were having on the students. You can see the laundry list below. Unfortunately, the school district refused to listen. The University of Florida's Mass Spectrometry and Research Center did an extensive study on masks, and they found no COVID on the masks that were worn at school, but everything else was. Therapists and researchers are finding more delays and regressions due to the mandates. Jacqueline Thieck, a clinical director and speech and language pathologist in North Palm Beach, told ABC News that she had seen a 364% increase in the number of cases. She said things are looking like autism. They're not trying to make word attempts. They're not trying to communicate. And she said, it's very important that kids do see your face to learn so that they're watching your mouth. And also I saw a study, a very extensive study using hundreds of thousands of kindergartners throughout the state of Texas. And they found the same thing, that the mask wearing, even if it was a clear shield, was preventing the students from learning how to read. And, you can find it in the JAMA pediatrics website, along with other speech and language pathologists. Everybody you're going to talk to is saying the children are having trouble recognizing emotions and having other delays. University of Southern California, they did a report and found that it's been disrupting learning, reduces the ability to communicate, expressions, and this is having a deep impact on nonverbal communication. And as a parent of 2 special needs children that need to have that nonverbal communication to understand what somebody's actually talking about, along with other students that have hearing impairments, it's been a detrimental effect on students. And these are the 2 authors of the paper, and they are high caliber scientists, doctors that have high credentials, University of Southern California, Stanford. And they went into the fact that the CDC, the mask mandates were a wash. That, you could take a county next to another county, one had mask mandates, one didn't, and there wasn't a distinguished difference. And Brown University also did a study. They collected data on 1,600 children, and they found that young children's development dropped by up to 23%. But all of this is having an even deeper effect. Schools are having a huge uptick in bullying and fights, and along with the sexual assaults. And this is by design, because the schools don't have enough officers, which is legally required by law. Most of them don't have proper working equipment like radios, which is incredibly vital if there's an emergency. That has been reported to the school districts with no change, no equipment ordered. The students are changing the way that they're even handling these things. They're targeting students, they're filming them, they're uploading the videos onto YouTube channels. And most of this is CRT based, it's racially charged. There are massive fights leading to hospitalizations, arrests, and even pepper sprays. And it's not just that, but there's emotional damage. There's damage to their academic records. Fiona Lachelle is a 2nd grader who was given over 38 days of out of school suspension for trying to exercise her individual right not to wear a mask. Now that a federal judge has ruled these mandates to be unconstitutional, it would behoove all of these school boards to issue apologies and clear the records of these students, including poor little 5-year-olds who were put in isolation. No recess, no PE, no lunch, no conversation for an entire day. And it's not just the short-term damage, it's long-term damage as well. I've talked to a plethora of local employers, and they're telling me they're having to fire the younger generation because they can't hold a job. They give them a task to do at work, and they can't sequence how to problem solve and complete the task. There's also a poor work ethic. They're given a task that's part of their job description, and they refuse to do it. And there's also less opportunities. With the reduction in math, reduction in actually teaching reading and math, these students don't have the opportunities that they could possibly have to get into college or into a better position and career. And then that's just cumulative as they age. So how do we turn the light bulb on in the community? As I like to say, we live in a sea of information, but are drowning in ignorance. Many people just don't connect the dots and realize the personal impact that this has. I get a lot of people saying, well, I don't have kids, or my kids are grown, or my kids are not in public school. But nobody can hide from the nuclear fallout that is the byproducts of this system. We are dealing with individuals that have going to be your doctors, your lawyers, your judges, your elected officials. They're going to be working and dealing with you in every single capacity of your life, including your national security. Part of the problem is this younger generation refuses to volunteer for what they consider a, quote, systematically racist nation. They don't want to defend it. That's your national security. Loss of freedoms. We are gladly handing over our rights because they're not being taught. You have censorship happening, including school boards trying to limit public comment and black out the broadcast of those comments. They're rewriting society, taking down statues, renaming schools, trying to use the 1619 Project, and it's dividing families. I've talked to so many adults and grandparents, and their kids are walking in the door starting to scream at them that they're racist and bigoted and they hate them, simply based on what they're learning. Now, there are more aspects to this damaging our nation. It's damaging their futures. It's harder to apply for college. It's eliminating thought, and it's forcing compliance. People are gladly handing over rights that they don't understand, the consequences of giving over those rights. Some of them, they don't even know that they had the right to that in the first place. So how can you help? And the first step is to keep learning. These are 4 great books that I highly recommend. First is Standing Up to Goliath by Rebecca Fredericks. She's amazing. She is a former California public school teacher who took California to the Supreme Court. She has blown the lid on the sexually explicit materials that are being used in schools. There's Black Eye for America, How Critical Race Theory is Burning Down the House. That is by Dr. Carol M. Swan, and she is taking a deep dive look into what exactly is critical race theory and how is it affecting the country. And then there's also Mark Levin's American Marxism. He goes into very explicit detail into what is Marxism and how it has translated into American life. And then there's also Luke Rosiak, his Race to the Bottom. He talks a great deal about what's happening nationwide, but also in Fairfax County, which is where I grew up. But he goes into very, very minute details as to how all of this is affecting our school boards, our children, the parents, and education in general. And so one other thing that you can do is to get involved with a group. I strongly believe that, we're stronger together when we link arms, kind of like Red Rover. And there are a lot of groups out there. I don't list them all, but there's Freedom Works, there's BEST, Freedom Speaks, Florida Citizens Alliance. You can join Moms for Liberty, Moms for America. There's a plethora of groups out there. That is a great place to also learn more information and just to be able to get involved in different activities and get support. So share what you know. Don't be afraid. This is something that we need to bring back to America, is having discourse and discussion. Social emotional learning, we see the fruit of that every day because it literally shuts down the brain to having the ability to speak. You get so wrapped up in your emotions that you shut everything out. So we've got to start retraining our nation to discourse and discussion. So don't be afraid, share what you know. Speak at the school board meetings, and not just the school board meetings, but they have committee hearings as well. If we don't speak out, the wheel's not going to get greased. One thing to note, please do it respectfully and peacefully. There's been a lot of gaslighting of parents. You've had the National School Board Association's letter to the DOJ saying that we were domestic terrorists. So don't give them any fodder. Just be polite, be respectful, be peaceful, but get your point across. And also write your state leaders. Again, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. They need to know that you are their employer, basically, and that you are uncovering this, you don't like it, and more importantly, that it's violating Florida statutes, it's violating the Constitution. And also support like-minded candidates like me that are working on your behalf. We're trying to refocus back on academics, trying to better fund and support education like choice programs. I'm a big proponent of choice. My 3 kids are living examples of the fact that we need choice and that one size does not fit all. My daughter is extremely accelerated. I had a lot of people telling me to pull her back, but I knew she needed to go at her pace, and she's excelled and thrived. Whereas my 2 sons, who are also just as gifted, but they have a lot of special needs, need to go at their own pace. But also don't forget to just keep speaking up, keep learning, and keep getting involved. So you can contact me for more information. And if you'd like me to present this information to your group or organization, my contact information is below. Thank you so much for your interest in what may be the greatest fight of this century. And thank you for being open-minded enough to listen and to be willing to explore these situations and these problems with me. I truly believe that if we work together, we are going to restore our schools. This is one thing that we all can agree on, is that we want our children to be responsible adults that contribute to society, and we want them to get the strongest academic education possible. We want to teach kids how to think, not what to think. Thank you so much for listening.
I'm Jennifer Showalter, candidate for Palm Beach County School Board District 6, and I approve this message.